Xabi Alonso!
He's achieved great things as a player and as a coach.
Of Xabi Alonso's tactics, team selection and his coaching in general.
We all love a football fairy tale, right? From a struggling team to unbeaten champions, Xabi Alonso pulled off the impossible at Bayer Leverkusen. But now he's stepping into something very different. This isn't Germany anymore, this is Real Madrid, and that changes everything. Because here's the truth, if Xabi Alonso fails, it won't be because of his tactics, it'll be because of his biggest weakness. But what are those weaknesses and how can they affect him? Well, let's talk about that. When Xabi Alonso took over at Bayer Leverkusen, he wasn't inheriting a title-challenging team or even a solid mid-table side. He was walking into a club that was spiralling, sitting dangerously close to the bottom of the Bundesliga table with no structure, no momentum and very little belief in what they were doing on the pitch. But what made Alonso's arrival so impressive wasn't just the results that followed, it was the fact that he didn't rush anything. He didn't try to impose flashy ideas or reinvent the wheel in his first few weeks. Instead, he focused on reorganizing the squad, tightening the backline, giving the players a clearer understanding of their roles, and slowly establishing a tactical identity. By the end of that first season, Leverkusen had climbed from 17th to 6th, and not because of a few lucky wins or individual brilliance, but because the team, as a collective unit, finally looked like it knew what it was doing. In his second season, Alonso built on that foundation with precision. The team started pressing with purpose, they looked confident in possession, and most importantly, they were able to dominate games without ever looking desperate. You could see the work on the training ground translating into real results, and what made it even more impressive was the consistency. They didn't just beat teams, they controlled the pace, the rhythm, the space, and that led to something no one expected. A historic unbeaten run in the Bundesliga that ended up with them lifting the title. This wasn't just a good season, it was a statement. Then came the third season, and this is the part that's telling. For the first time, Alonso and his team were no longer the underdogs. Now they were the team everyone else was chasing. They didn't win the league this time, they finished second, but they weren't falling apart or dropping off. Instead, they showed that they had matured into a consistent, top-level side that belonged at the very top of German football. And that's what makes Xabi Alonso's rise so compelling. He didn't take shortcuts, he didn't rely on big names or one-season wonders. He built a project, year by year, first by repositioning the team, then by taking them to the top, and finally by proving they could stay there. That's why so many people believe in him and trust that his methods can work anywhere. Because when you watch Leverkusen under Alonso, you're not just seeing a team that wins, you're seeing a team that plays with identity, structure and purpose, all of which are being carefully crafted by the manager himself. But now, he's walking into a completely different environment, one that doesn't give you time to build year by year, one where success isn't a process, but a demand. And that brings us to his first and maybe his biggest weakness: patience. This is where things get tricky, because what Xabi Alonso had at Bayer Leverkusen more than anything else was time. Time to figure things out, time to experiment, time to fail, reflect and improve. That luxury doesn't exist at Real Madrid, not even a little bit. At Leverkusen, he was allowed to finish 6th in his first season without people questioning whether he was the right man for the job. That 6th place finish was seen as progress, and it was. It showed that the team was responding to his ideas. But at Real Madrid, 2nd place isn't progress, it's a disaster. It's a headline, it's pressure, it's people calling for your. Real Madrid doesn't operate on long-term vision the way clubs like Leverkusen or even some Premier League projects do. Madrid is all about immediate results, instant success. Every dropped point becomes a story, every bad substitution becomes a crisis, and every trophyless season becomes a failure. That's not to say Madrid doesn't respect footballing intelligence or long-term planning, but it's a club that has built its identity on winning, and winning now. That's what the fans expect, that's what the board demands, and that's what the headlines are built around. And here's the real challenge. Alonso's style of management is very process-driven. He's not the kind of manager who simply reacts to the chaos of the moment. He wants his team to play a certain way, follow a system and develop a rhythm. That takes time. Excuses. And that's where his biggest weakness might show, not because he doesn't have the footballing knowledge or tactical intelligence, we've already seen that he has, but because he's stepping into an environment that won't allow him the breathing room he had at Leverkusen. The question is, can he compress his 3-year Leverkusen project into a single season at Madrid? Can he implement his tactical ideas, get the dressing room on board and deliver results all at once, without that process-oriented build-up that made him successful in Germany? That's the real challenge. Because, unlike Leverkusen, Real Madrid won't wait for him to figure it out. It's about handling a squad full of superstars who don't just see themselves as important to the team, but as global icons. At Bayer Leverkusen, Alonso was able to build a unit without distractions. There weren't any massive personalities that dominated the dressing room. The team functioned as a system. Every player understood their role. No one believed they were above the structure, and the balance of power was always in the manager's hands. He didn't have to navigate complicated player politics or media narratives surrounding individuals because the environment was built for development, not stardom. But now he's walking into a Real Madrid squad that includes names like Kylian Mbappe, Vinicius Jr., Jude Bellingham, and potentially others with similar profiles. Players with enormous followings, global attention, and personal brands that sometimes outshine the badge on their shirt. Managing that kind of squad is not just about tactics or training ground drills. It's about diplomacy, timing, knowing when to speak, when to step back, and how to keep everyone bought into the collective vision without stepping on egos. Mbappe, for example, is not just another forward. He's a Ballon d'Or contender, a World Cup winner, and one of the most marketable athletes in the world. He's used to being the focal point. Bellingham has just had a breakout season where he was carrying Madrid at times in the Benzema era. And now Alonso has to convince all of them, quietly and tactically, to buy into a system where they might not always be the centre of attention. And let's be clear, this is not about personality clashes or drama, it's about managing expectations and status. Because if any of these players start feeling like they're being sidelined, misused, or made less important for the sake of a system, it doesn't take long for friction to appear. What makes this job even harder is that Alonso, for all his success at Leverkusen, is still managing only his second major club. He hasn't been through the kind of dressing rooms that force you to learn the hard way. He hasn't had to mediate between superstars or deal with internal pressure from agents, media, or the boardroom pushing agendas. Real Madrid is not just a football club, it's a political machine. Managing there means navigating layers of influence, opinion, and expectation. And unlike his time in Germany, the players here have the power to shift the narrative quickly. If Alonso wants his tactics to work, he'll need every single one of those big names to buy in, not just publicly, but fully, day in and day out. And that is not easy when dealing with players who are used to being the system, not serving it. And even if he finds a way to balance all that, there's still another challenge. A challenge that doesn't come from the pitch or even the players. It comes from the very top. Florentino Perez. Now, here's something that no amount of coaching badges or tactical sessions can fully prepare you for. Florentino Perez. Because when you step into Real Madrid as a manager, you're not just stepping into a football club, you're stepping into Perez's empire. And this is a man who has made it very clear over the years that footballing logic will always come second to brand value, prestige, and spectacle. And that's where Alonso faces another real challenge, because as much as he's a tactician, someone who builds systems where every piece has to make sense, he's now working under a president who doesn't always care if the puzzle fits. He just wants the most expensive pieces. Look at what happened with Kylian Mbappe. Carlo Ancelotti was clear he already had Vinicius Jr. dominating that left side, he had Rodrigo developing on the right, and he had Bellingham operating in that free role. He knew where the balance was, and yet Perez still went ahead with Mbappe. Not because the system demanded it, but because the Galactico brand needed it. And this is the reality Alonso now has to operate in. He can build a tactical plan around control, pressing, and positional fluidity, but then wake up one morning and find that a player has been signed because of their Instagram following or commercial value. That breaks the tactical structure, that undermines continuity, and it puts the manager in a difficult spot, especially a manager like Alonso, whose philosophy is built on making players fit into his tactical ideas, not the other way around. That's a big contrast from someone like Ancelotti or even Zidane. Those guys are elite managers, no question, but they're in front of them. Zidane didn't need to control every inch of the pitch. He just needed to give freedom to Ronaldo, Benzema and Modric, and let their talent take over. Ancelotti never insisted on his system being the main idea. He shaped his approach to fit the superstars. But Xabi Alonso is not that type of manager. His teams are about patterns, control zones and positional discipline. If a player isn't carrying out his specific instruction, it affects the entire structure. He doesn't want chaos, he wants harmony, but a harmony that's designed by him, not one that emerges from improvisation. And that's where he might run into real problems, because if Perez keeps forcing signings that don't fit into Alonso's blueprint, and history suggests that he absolutely will, then the system suffers, and Alonso will either have to compromise his tactical identity, which weakens what made him special at Leverkusen in the first place, or he'll stand firm and risk conflict with the president. Either way, that tension becomes a weakness, because no matter how good a manager is, no matter how strong their philosophy, you cannot win long-term battles against the president of Real Madrid. And even if Alonso somehow manages to juggle the pressure, the egos, and the top-down interference, there's still one more question. A tactical one. Possibly the biggest of them all. Is this Real Madrid squad even built to play Alonso's system? Squad tactical issues. Xabi Alonso's system at Bayer Leverkusen wasn't just a tactical gimmick, it was a fully engineered structure. The 3-4-2-1 wasn't just a formation on paper, it was the foundation for how his entire team functioned, from the build-up to transitions to final third actions. It required precise profiles, centre-backs who are excellent on the ball, right wings who can maintain width but also overload central spaces, two midfielders with insane discipline and positional intelligence, and two creative midfielders who play between the lines but constantly rotate and press when the ball is lost. Now look at Real Madrid. Yes, they're trying to move in that direction. Bringing in young players like Dean Howson and Alvaro shows that they're at least aware of the kind of defenders Alonso might want in a back three. But you only need to look at the core of this squad to see how far away they are from being ready for that kind of transformation. This is a team that has been shaped year after year around a back four. Their fullbacks like Ferland Mendy and Dani Carvajal providing width in a flat backline. Asking them to suddenly play as wing-backs with dual attacking and midfield responsibilities is not just a tactical tweak, it's a positional overhaul. And there's no guarantee they'll adapt, and with the signing of Trent on the right side, it will make it easier. But what happens if he gets injured? Even in midfield, Alonso's system requires a double pivot that holds its shape at all times. Not a midfield that flows or takes turns pushing forward. Truly falls apart. You've got Vinicius Jr., Rodrigo, and now Kylian Mbappe. These are not players who operate naturally as tucked-in attacking midfielders in a narrow 3-4-2-1 shape. They need space, they need wide channels, and most importantly, they need freedom to break structure and attack at speed. Asking them to function in Alonso's framework means limiting their instincts, and once you do that, you take away what makes them special. So yes, Real Madrid are trying to future-proof their squad. Yes, they're signing young, technical defenders, they're stockpiling midfield talent, and they're clearly interested in progressive football. But that doesn't change the fact that this is not a squad built for Xabi Alonso's system. Not right now, not without serious changes. And unlike at Bayer Leverkusen, Alonso won't have the time to build it from the ground up. He won't be allowed 2 or 3 transfer windows to phase out a player who doesn't fit and bring in the right profiles. At Madrid, the expectation is simple: win from day one. And you have to do it with the squad that exists, even if that squad is working against your entire tactical vision. That's why when we talk about Alonso's move to Real Madrid, we have to stop thinking about it like a simple fairy tale of a former player coming home. This is not a romantic reunion, it's a structural test. And if that structure doesn't bend in his direction, if the egos, the president and the squad aren't ready to align with him, then even someone as talented as Xabi Alonso could find himself overwhelmed. Not because he's not good enough, but because Real Madrid might not be the right platform for what he does best. But what do you think? Can he succeed? And do you think Real Madrid can be patient with him? Well, let me know in the comments, and don't forget to check out our last video on why we should be scared of this new Real Madrid. Thank you.